Hey everybody. So today we will be going over basic side control concepts, a couple of moves that you can use to help neutralize your opponent's positioning and responses, and the Kimura submission and in both of its incarnations. Okay, so let's talk about the side control position first. Use my buddy Bob here to demonstrate on. So Bob here, when I get inside control on Bob, you're going to notice there's probably going to be a lot of space between me and him. Ideally, there wouldn't be, but it really depends on how low you can get your hips to the ground. My bigger thighs don't really work for that, but when I get close or when I'm able to hug correctly, then I can get in real close, okay? So when I'm on Bob here, you always want to try to have one knee near the hip, and you want to try to keep that connected as much as you possibly can. And then you want the other knee as high as you can up against their head. So what I like to do is when I come in, I like to get really high, like right up next to their ear. So if I had a phone in my knee, they'd be talking to my knee, okay? Then that's what you do with that's what you want to do with your legs, okay? And don't let this leg hang out here, because a lot of guys can turn their hips without too much trouble, grab that foot, put you back into half guard. So we don't want that. What we want is we want this leg tucked, and we want it nice and high up against. So again, first knee close to the hip, second knee up near the head. All right. Now you may not get all the way up here because a traditional side control grip is arm underneath like this, arm underneath like this, and then gable grip. Okay. Now, to remind you of the gable grip, your thumbs like flipper grips, and then you're just going to take one hand, wrap it over the thumb of another, and then the fingers will go on the blade of the other hand. All right, so that's called a gable grip, okay? So most people will play the traditional grip and use their shoulder to drive into the face. Now this is really good for pinning and whatnot, and can lead to your collar chokes the couple of collar chokes that we did last week, or when we learned from bottom side. So if I'm here and I'm here and I'm here, then I'm going to grab that collar like this and start in on my collar chokes. Okay. Now, when you're on top, you're always kind of looking for a way to attack or transition. All right. Those are your two options when you're inside control. And so to kind of give you the breakdown again of the hierarchy, you got guard, which is like this. All right. This is not equitable because while I'm on top and I have gravity, your opponent has their legs. So this is actually a stronger position for the guy on the bottom because of that. Right? Now, if I get to half guard, which is like we talked about a couple weeks ago, this, so one leg in, one leg out, this is probably more 50-50 than anything. Mainly because there are a few attacks that I can go towards, and he can go for his own attacks. But there's also some neutralizing things that I can do to make it so that he can't attack me and I can pass. All right. Now, side control, one leg difference. So it's literally like inside leg. Now I'm not inside the leg. This makes a huge difference in my ability to submit my opponent. Okay. So here, the bottom guy mainly should be thinking, oh, geez, I need to get out from underneath this guy. And the top guy should be thinking, do I want to keep going to a stronger area of attack, or do I want to move or do I want to try to submit somebody? So we're gonna show some of both throughout this. All right. But again, we're gonna start with the positioning. So again, proper side control. So one of the best ways to get good up here is to grab the sleeve like this, so that when you pass, you pull this up like this. And now his arm's really deep in me here, and I'm really pressing on him like this. All right. So if you remember watching last week, if you put your arm down here like this, yes, this is good control. The underhook is really good control to keep your opponent down. And so I'm going to show you good positions for using the underhook. All right. So position number one is just, your traditional side control. Then what you can also do is move to what we call judo side control. All right. And judo side control is good for, there's a few things you can do that are pretty good for judo side control. But it's mainly good to re-grip this arm, right? Because last week, if you remember, we were here in traditional side control, and your opponent puts his arm inside. We don't want to have the arm inside. So we reach back, we grab the sleeve like this, and then we sit through. We don't sit back, we sit through. So I stay in the same spot. I pull this arm up, and then I push it across again and re-engage my traditional side control. All right. Now, that's what most people will use that for. There are a couple other things you can do from here. If you've got the arm in the right place, there is a arm lock you can do where you can, if his arms were longer, I'd probably be able to show this easier, but you can take this leg, put it over this arm, and position it, and you can do an arm attack here. I will also say it's easier to do it from scarf hold rather than judo side, because this is judo side. Difference being this is judo side and this is scarf hold. And I'm going to grab this. This is a position that you can end up in when you try to pass, but you don't get your underhook. All right. So what I mean is like, so if I go to pass my opponent, so I'm in half like this, and I've got this sleeve, and I go to pass, but he's real tight. So as I'm passing, I go for his head, so my opponent doesn't come out from underneath me, and I pull this up at the same time, so he has to stay, so he can't turn away from me. Does that make sense? So I'm pulling on this so that this shoulder can't come up. If I'm pulling on this shoulder, it puts pressure on that shoulder, so this shoulder can't come up. So I'm pulling here, and when I come through, I grab the head, I pass, and there we are, scarf hold. All right, now from scarf hold, it is a lot easier to do those arm attacks because of the positioning of the body. And there are actually quite a few other fun little things you can do from here. But from regular side control, if we do get the underhook, which is, best case, we're in our judo side control, okay? And we can use that to get back to regular, traditional side control, okay? I'm gonna turn this guy a little bit so I can keep showing you guys from a slightly different angle. So come back a little bit so you get in there. All right, so we're here, right? And I've got the arm, and I pull it up, and I get to the top here. Now, see how my arm automatically comes to the outside of the head like this? This is a position that I like to take. So if my arm ends up over here, then I can actually create a stronger position, in my opinion, by using my elbow against their head. Now, a lot of this has to do with fluidity. So when you first start doing side control, your main focus should be trying to control your opponent until you figure out what you want to do. Okay, so that's why we go to traditional side control. It's very strong to hold somebody up high, gable grip, or on the collar and the shoulder like this. So I go collar and shoulder. That's another strong one. And then from here, I can actually use my shoulder to drive into my opponent like this, making his life real uncomfortable while I go for another attack. And if you followed last week's defense advice, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to wrap this arm around here. So if that arm gets overhooked strongly, I won't be able to get this arm out. And I can't do a lot of attacks if I don't have this arm. So I need to create a scenario where he lets this go, where your opponent lets this go. And it can happen in multiple ways. But I think one of the easiest ways is just to attempt a paper cutter choke, but without actually like finishing it, because you can't finish it because you need this part. So if you're here and he's got your arm real tight, just swing this arm over and use your forearm to push down on your opponent. He'll freak out a little bit, get this hand up, and once he does, then the position I like, the other side control position I like, is the reverse side control. I would strain to call it that, but I don't think there's a better name for it. And so reverse side control works kind of like this. You're gonna have your knee up real high, right? But instead of having this underhooked, you're actually gonna have this elbow here up against their head. You're gonna use that to scoop their head in, and then you're gonna have this hand over here blocking their hips. So it's kind of like this. Okay, so again, here, and here. This is where I'm at. Mainly because it is a tendency for most people to turn into you. All right, so when they turn into you, you need to block that hip. All right, block them coming in. So side control is actually a fairly complicated situation or position. So so we're going to start with today. We're going to start with a pressure control situation. We're going to control this. We're going to do it differently. So I'm going to take my reverse side control position here, and instead of blocking the hip here, I'm actually going to take my hand, find that crevice on the hip between the knee and the hip, and push down on it like this. All right, and the fun thing too is once I've done this, I don't actually have to have this leg up like that. If I need to create more pressure, I can flatten out and do that. And most of the time, your opponent is maybe going to try to get this hand on their side. That's when we attack for our kimura. So when they go to come after this hand or try to get underneath, then we can easily switch to this and go for our kimura. Okay. So this is the first move that I like to do. I like to pressure down on the chest here. I've got space. I don't think you can see it from this angle, but like my hips are not, like my hips can literally just almost be on the floor here because I'm driving in and then I'm using this hand to control the hip. All right. So even if he bridges, he's still bridging into a structure. And it's going to be hard for him to get this hand off and make those mobility moves. You only have, I mean, really, you only need about 20 or 30% control of this hip, and it'll slow him down enough to where you can stop anything. If for some reason they happen to get their hips out, it's real easy for you because their hips will come out and up, and then you just sit here and block, and then you can drive your shoulder forward, get them back down, move back to the hip press. This is what I do with guys who are really squirrely. I lay on top of them like this because even the smaller guys, like they only, like I'm a big guy, so smaller guys have speed. So how do you control somebody who's speed and maybe even thrashes? Put your hand on their hip. They can't roll the other way. There's no reason to, right? But I'm really crushing my opponent right now. I've got their head. I'm grabbing their armpit here. I'm doing this. If they don't keep their arm up here like this, blocking my face, framing my face, I'm going to grab this arm and I'm going to finish him. All right. So conceptually here, This is one of the variations of side control. And from here, this is where I always go to. I just instinctively go to this. I don't even go to the traditional one anymore. The traditional one is good when you're trying to figure out what you want to do. Okay? So figure out what you want to do. What kind of player are you going to be? And that will determine. The other nice thing, too, about the hip press, especially if he's framing here, is I can go to mount. So from here, it's real easy for me to control the hip, come up, and swing over to mount. Just like that. Okay? It's a pretty easy way to transition. Like I said, your choices when you're inside control are to finish or transition. So in this case, this move in particular, which is the hip press, is the more pressure sensitive move. All right. Now, if you are in your traditional position like this, and they start to bridge up like they should, they start to bridge up in here like this to create that space, I automatically, I'm pressing into them. They have to press against my weight, and this is true for, small to big. You want to keep that pressure going down. And when they go to do this, what most people are going to try to do is they're going to try to recover guard by getting the knee inside, either the top or the bottom. All right. Very rarely has someone been able to recover guard once I block the hip. All right. So again, we're in traditional side control. They go to turn into me. So I switch. This hand goes over the head. This hand goes here. And I also kind of come out just a little bit like this. All right. And then if they're still on their hips, then I can do a couple things. I could switch to north-south, make it really easy to switch to north-south, which is another, I would consider it on the gamut of side control, because even though I'm not on the side anymore, it's the same idea. The legs are far away. So north-south is like this. So notice how I'm on top, my head's near their chest, they're on bottom, their head's in my chest. And sometimes if you do this right, you can actually put your abdomen in their face and press down, and they can submit from suffocation. It happens. So if anybody ever goes to side control like this, you want to turn your head away. Or the other problem, of course, is there's a north-south choke. So in that respect, I would actually try and turn toward my opponent. It's much easier for me to push them this way because my abdomen and my belly here can push their head that way. But they want to try to get their head this way in order to escape that choke. So if I was going the other way, they'd want to turn. It's always in toward your opponent. That also helps too, because where your head goes, your body follows. All right. So if my opponent's head is pushed that way, he can only go that way. If my opponent's head is pushed this way, he can only go this way. If my opponent's head's up and down, just like Mr. Miyagi says, just like grape. Right? Stand in the middle, stand left side road. You know what I'm talking about, hopefully. But in any case, so the shoulder here, or my chest here is pressing on the head, and this is your north-south position. So there's lots of positions you can go to that are still considered a variation of side control, because it's really easy for me to go to north-south, then go out to the side. All right. So I'll show you a common variation of this. So if I'm in north-south like this, just over the guy, and I've got this underhook, and he starts to turn this way, right? I'm going to let him, and then once he does, I'm going to sit up into him, and then take my kimura again. All right. This is a figure 4 shoulder lock, popularized by Kimura in the Ilio Gracie fight. If you don't know what that is, it's a good history lesson. You can look it up, about one of our founders of Jiu-Jitsu. So Um, so let's talk about now that we've kind of talked about our position, let's review our possibilities here, okay, for today. All right, I know I've talked a lot just about the different positions that you could be in side control, but let's talk about the different possibilities. Okay, so I pass in a side control, and I've got a traditional side control like this, okay? And my opponent turns into me to try to escape because I don't have good control of the hips up here. So what are they going to do? They're going to turn, they're going to shoot their hips back, and they're going to get their leg inside. Or they're going to turn, and they're going to try to get their arm inside and go for a low single. Or maybe they turn and they get their arm underneath, and they're going to go for the ghost escape. And if you don't know what any of those are, you have to watch the videos before. Okay? So they go for these moves. I'm going to turn, I'm going to keep pressure on him, and when I do, my hands come free, and I can bring this hand here and block the hip. So he's turned into me, and I've blocked the hip. Now, he keeps trying to turn in. I don't like this. So I'm going to switch to the hip press. And I'm just going to put my hand on his hip. I'm going to drive with my body, and I'm going to drive with my hand. Now I've got the hip press. All right? Now let's talk about different kimuras, because there are two different kimuras from side control. Okay? Kimura number one is the easiest kimura. If you get it, you get it locked in, there literally should be no reason for you not to finish, unless you know my escape move. And I'll show you that in a second. So the regular flat on your back kimura looks like this. You're going to grab the hand. Ideally, your arm's going to be under their shoulder already. All right, if it's not, you're going to have to put it there. Okay, so the hand goes to the mat. Once it's at the mat, you grab your wrist and you rotate motorcycle style like this. Try to get it into their back as much as you can. If you leave it out here, it's going to be harder to finish. So you need to get it motorcycled in. So when I say motorcycle, I mean turn your wrists over, or you turn your hands over like this, over the top of your wrists, like this. All right, so motorcycle, pull it in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch the hips to the outside like this, lifting your opponent up and pushing on their arm like this. Won't get very far before they tap. Okay, that's how you finish your kimura from the bottom. Okay, one more time. Your opponent tries to come underneath on this side. You're here and here. Your opponent tries to come underneath on this side. You sit up just a little bit, grab their wrist, push it down. All right, if this arm isn't inside, goes underneath, grabs your wrist, you're gonna rotate and bring it in. And once they're in here really good, you're gonna switch. So notice how I'm on my left hip here for this move, or on my left side. I'm gonna switch to my right side, and I'm gonna turn, and I'm gonna lift him up, and I'm gonna make sure to keep this back. I want to get it out here. If I get it out here, people with flexible shoulders, they won't feel it. And it can actually be extra dangerous because if you don't, if different anatomies do different things, and it might not feel pain until it actually breaks. So that's the problem with keeping it high. All right. Same with the Americana. If you're doing an Americana and you don't slide the hand back as you lift it up, you just try to lift it up, and somebody's shoulder rotates with you, you might get to a point where they don't know there's any danger until it happens. So there's a right way to do a submission and a wrong way to do a submission. And also wrong way, don't speed through it, okay? Bottom line is that if you get that hand to the mat and you pin it to the mat, there's only one thing I've ever found that's going to stop you from being submitted, okay? Literally just one thing. And again, I'll show you what that is in a second. So that's kimura number one. Now I want to talk about the defense to kimura number one because it can lead into kimura number two, all right? So the defense for the bottom kimura. There are two things that you can do because your opponent has to have a particular situation in order to make it work. All right. So the first thing your opponent needs is that that shoulder. They need to get underneath your arm. right? So if your opponent pins your hand to the mat, let's say you're up here and they're up to, and you know, like you're not framing right or whatever, they grab your wrist and they double pin your hand to the mat, all right? The easiest way to keep your opponent from attacking your arm is to slightly roll and drive that shoulder down, all right? Because if they can't get underneath this hand, this arm, they can't kimura you, right? That's number one, okay? So they're trying, you're over here, you're pressing and pushing while they're attacking that, and once they get too low, then you can potentially turn into them. So if I'm here and I'm pressing and pushing and I'm getting them lower and lower on my body because I flatten my legs out, can't get them lower than my knees. So if their body ends up here, I can't push them any farther. So I need to go down like this. I push them and get them down there. They're still trying to attack my hand, right? Then I should be able to turn and come in and support this arm, pull it back, 2-on-2, right? Okay, that's one. Now the other problem, again, you run into is your opponent gets the arm underneath, and he gets everything together. And you're like, oh crap, I'm gonna die. He's gonna tear my arm off, right? So here's what you do. This is a little trick I learned, because remember, one of our key understandings of Jiu-Jitsu is it's easier to move yourself than it is to move your opponent. Okay, if you're a real strong guy like me, and I was going against somebody who was like 120 pounds, I could probably push him off with one arm, right? But if I'm, going against a guy who's 225 pounds or heavier, that's going to be real hard for me. So pushing him off, not an option. Moving me, that's an option. So hands to the mat, he's got the shoulder, he's trying to get everything together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move myself backwards. So let's say my arm's way up here like this. My arm's going to stay in the same place. It's my whole body that's going to move. So watch. So my arm stays there. I go like this. I put my hand on the mat, use the grip here to move my body around my hand. Okay? So one more time. My arm's here. He's got it pinned. I don't even really need to slam it to the mat because he's got my arm pinned. Once he's got my arm pinned to the mat like this, I can just move underneath it. So I just push myself up underneath it like this. Now once I'm here, okay, this, like I said, this leads to the second kimura. So now that I'm here, this is, like I said, that's the worst case scenario. If I'm already up here and up here like this, I'm done. All right, if you didn't do this step beforehand, you're done, okay? So I'm here, I push myself up. I'm gonna turn my hip down just like this and see what happens. My hand, usually people don't kimura at the hand. There are some people who find the wrist, the hand like this, a strong way to kimura people. But most people start at the wrist. Most people start at the upper forearm area to control, and then they move down to what the actual wrist area, which is this like bottom third of your hand. But you should still be able to do this. Okay? Even with my wrist pinned, I should still be able to do this. So guess what that gives me? If I turn this in here like this, oh, look at that, I can grab my pants. Now once I've grabbed my pants, I've turned myself. Now he doesn't have that kimura anymore. It's inside. I've got my pants. All right? And there are ways to deal with this, which is what we're going to deal with. We're going to talk about right now. All right? Which is kimura number 2. Okay? So kimura number 2 is the most common kimura, mainly because kimura number 1 is difficult to hit, and kimura number 2 shows up more often because of people underhooking you. All right. So right when a guy turns into you, underhook. Right. This is where they end up. No matter how wide your base is, no matter how low you are, no matter how strong you are, whatever. This is where they end up. So you grab this wrist, shoulder right there. You go to do the kimura. Most people, boom, go right down into their pants or their jacket. Or if this arm isn't trapped, they'll double arm themselves this way. Okay. So once you've been kimura'd here, all right, once you get to this kimura here, okay, to finish, the first thing you need to do is you need to step over the head, all right, because you need to block the back. All right. So you block the back like this, and you sit on their head. This table. And you sit on their head. So I've got this Kimura. I'm sitting on my opponent's head. He's holding on. All right. Now there are lots of ways to get the arm away. All right. And when you become a Kimura master, you will learn those ways. All right. But for now, know that a good defense is grabbing your the only universal one is your hands in gable grip together. All right. If you can't get that, then you got to tuck it inside your pants and try to bring your legs up as high as you can. And this will also prevent potential Kimura moves as well. But for the sake of finishing the Kimura, what we're going to do is we're going to take this arm and we're going to lift it up. It's going to come over to the back side here in my Kimura grip. I'm going to push it back down to the back, and then I'm going to rotate this way. All right, rotate that way. All right. So again, setting up this Kimura, there's lots of ways to do it. Like I said, north-south is one way. So if I go north-south and I've got an overhook on a guy, I can try to lift him up, and once I do, I can get to that Kimura, right? But it's still the same Kimura. It's from the side, and your opponent turns into you. So my opponent turns into me, right? And another thing, and so I go for this Kimura. I windshield wiper my feet. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But I windshield wiper my feet, and then I step over, trying to keep the pressure going this way. All right. If I loosen that pressure, that's how we escape the next part. Okay. So boom, come down here, squeeze my thighs together, try to keep the head trapped in between the thighs, and then I can use different pressures, pop this up and over, and then around the back. Okay. So that's Kimura number 2. Now, how do you defend against Kimura number 2? Hold on, let me show you the windshield wiper part first. So straight from this side. So your opponent comes up on you like this. Your feet are here. You grab for the Kimura, then you go to defend. So you're going to windshield wiper like that. All right, they were both kind of in the middle. So I'm going to windshield wiper from here. Then I'm going to step over the head and control the head using my knee. And then I finish. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the defenses to that. I'm going to show you from the front here so you can see, because most people will Kimura you on using your left side, because right side is dominant, and that's the side we always pass to. That's the side we always attack from. Most people. Some people get unorthodox and they go to the left, and then you drop a degree in your belt status because now you got to think of everything in reverse. So he's got my arm. All right. So one option, which works without a gi on as well, is try to get your legs up and stick your hand inside like this. Even if it's up here like this to get your leg up, you're actually using your arm to hold your leg up while they're holding that Kimura grip. That's fine, right? The only problem I have with this is now I don't have the use of my legs. I have this leg, but legs are more powerful in twos. So I don't have this leg. I just have this, this position. Number 2 is the belt. So I can grab my belt, again, with the gi, and grab my belt like this. And when he tries to yank, he's pulling against my belt. Again, a problem with this is if he does it right and he pulls it kind of up and out, my belt starts sliding around. Now my arm's up here. All I've got to do is get my hand off of the belt off the side, which can be a lot easier than trying to get my hand off my belt when it's down here. All right, when it's down like this. Okay. Third option is the gable grip. So again, we go thumb in, grab them. And I like to go this side over the thumb. That way it's pulling down. If I go the other way, see how weird my hand looks? This way my hand is curled in, and so I can kind of bicep curl. If I try to go this way, it's like doing a reverse curl. Like it just doesn't feel right like this. Sorry, like this. So notice my Notice like when you curl with your bench, when you curl barbells, usually you don't curl them like this. They call that a reverse curl. This is a regular curl, much stronger. And this is the arm I'm trying to defend. So I want as much strength as I can get to defend it. Just like that. Okay. So boom. I could also consider it the bodybuilder pose. All right. Now, when most people go for a kimura on me, they'll get my head trapped, like I showed you earlier. But I have this move that I like to do because the shoulder is usually not totally there's a little bit of looseness in the shoulder because everybody's worried about the wrist, everybody's worried about the head, but that interconnected part right in the middle there, that's going to be what's going to help you finish, or what help you get out of this. All right. So when my opponent has my arm in a kimura and I'm here like this, I call this move the wife. And the reason why I call it the wife is because when you sleep next to somebody, as you do your wife every night, and again, I'm a guy, so if you're a girl, you can call this your husband. It's fine. I called it the partner for a while, or significant other. Any of those names work. But essentially, the way that works is that if you are in bed with your significant other and you're both asleep and you want to roll over, you can't just go like this, right? I know I can't. I got a lot of body. So if I were to roll over 1.5 rolls and I'd be up on top of her, right? So what do? You do this thing where you actually roll in place, okay? And how you do it is you gotta get your butt in the air and then you twist it and the rest of your body sort of follows along, all right? So that's why this leg is real important because I'm gonna put it right here behind me like this and I'm gonna bridge off of it, and when I bridge off of it, then I'm gonna turn myself underneath. I'm not going to try to roll, I'm going to try to twist. I'm twisting underneath, okay? So it looks just like this. They got the kimura, I'm holding here like this, I bump up, now I'm on my back. I'm in the exact same position I was before, but now I'm on my back. And what happens is, when you do this move, your elbow slides past your opponent's arm. So yeah, now they still have a figure 4 on your wrist, but your elbow's now on the outside instead of on the inside. If right here, see, so imagine the arm is over, right? Right here, the arm is going underneath my tricep. It's going just like this to his other arm, that's figure 4, that's grabbed my wrist. So his arm's grabbed my wrist like this. His wrist is coming underneath my arm, and now that's the figure 4. So when I do this, my elbow slides past his arm. And so now his arm goes from being over here to over here, right? So that takes away your kimura in this position. All right, so one more time. So he grabs my arm. I know it's coming because it takes a second. And when I've got that second, I grab. Or I grab. Even if I grab something here, even just for a second is all I need. So once I grab, and see he's got my arm pinned, right? So I'm like, oh, I know what he's doing. He's got my arm pinned. I grab, he starts wrenching. Then I just put my foot here and just pull my shoulder, pull myself back down. Now I'm free again. If this arm's trapped, I'm gonna try to untrap this arm. Otherwise, I'm good to go on this side. Hopefully I got all that because I can only see part of the screen from where I'm sitting. All right, so that's 2 ways that somebody can escape the kimura. Now, I said that putting your hand in your pants is not my favorite because it does take that away. But there are people who will use that to escape as well. And it's not my favorite escape for 2 reasons. One, there is a guy named David Avalon who created this whole kimura system, and he called it the kimura trap. And one thing you do in the kimura trap, you do from this escape. The other thing is that you can actually turn this kimura into an arm bar from this exact same escape. Okay, so here's how it works. So your opponent gets you into the kimura position. Your hand is trapped, or your hand's like up here or whatever. You can't grab it. This works best for no-gi, obviously, because otherwise I could grab my pants. I could grab my belt, or I could even grab my lapel. And when he starts trying to pull on it, he's just pulling my lapel out, and he can only get me so far, So I'm here, right? I'm going. I'm maybe even got here, or this is going to be where it's at. So I'm in here like this. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn away from my opponent. So I'm going to sort of run a little bit like this, and then I'm going to get up. And he's going to still have the kimura in, but I'm going to get up to my all fours. My hand's still inside because he could kimura me if it's not. And then there's a, like I said, there's a position from there, which is the kimura trap position. That's actually the actual kimura trap. If I had a body, I would show you how that works. But I don't have a body, so there you go. And that's it. I know that was a lot of information and a lot of conceptual stuff, but it's all important stuff to remember and to think about, especially with the half guard game. So tomorrow I'll talk more about different transitions, different things to watch out for, different things to keep in mind, because what I touched on was only just a couple of the ideas there, specifically blocking the hip and pressing the hip, the two different positions, blocking the hip over and then pressing the hip over as well, making your opponent do something with his upper body that you can exploit, specifically the kimuras. But now you have some idea of how to defend against them, okay? So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching.